Okay, so we are live 2/13/2025. I'm using a new system, and so there may be some not glitches necessarily, but there's some things I had to figure out. For example, the screen sharing, audio sharing. I may have to preload some tracks. No big deal. I'm just kind of getting used to restream without OBS because there's just less uh, crap, to put it simply. It gets to be very cluttered, and we've dealt with enough of the gremlin infestation. A few things tonight. One, if you are working on South Pole, the script is going to be posted tonight, and it's mostly an outline. There's room for ad lib, but I want to have the structure so everyone's on the same page. Scheduled live streams from now on. We're going to be 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So tonight, much later than we'll be in the future. And I think having a regular scheduled live stream will get our numbers up and we'll get more callers. And we want to get the back-to-back caller thing going again, where we would have nonstop. And finally, Live World, which I think gave out a PDF like a month ago as a rough draft, more or less, close to a final, but I'm expanding it. I'm adding quite a bit more with the bifurcation of the mainstream psyops. I'm trying to really emphasize how things are split down the middle. So I'm adding that into the Live World before I go through the final print. And speaking of print, the IPS Insider has gone out. There's no more copies, but I am going to order additional copies of issue 1 properly formatted when issue 2 comes out. And as I put in a letter, a note to those who receive the first copy, the margins are a little too wide. They won't be that way in the future. I've already went over this with the printers. So let's see here. We are joined by Bach Precision, Waco Soto, Waters Above YOLO, Roxy W Ears Up, Maggart 4822, Conscious Reality. Thank you all for joining. Just the other day I was saying, if Elon Musk wasn't a total scammer and part of the big psyop, he would be using his newly appointed office, the Doge Department of Government Efficiency. I said he'd go after NASA. Why aren't they exposing the big money pit that is? I mean, they just throw so much money into it every day for who knows what, because they're certainly not going to space. And sure enough, Musk is actually going after NASA. And some are pointing this out as a conflict of interests. So he's not going after it the way that I'm suggesting, but he is, in fact, looking at NASA as extremely wasteful, which is kind of interesting. We're looking at Musk, the fourth branch of president. It has the left in a panic. I'm seeing a lot of anti-fascist type, like Antifa is going to go wild this summer. I think we can go ahead and plan on that. Antifa is going to go wild. They're already planning it. The script is there. If you haven't seen The Madness, I recommend it. We can look forward to a summer of um, Antifa on meth. Not that they aren't already, but in The Madness, the group they correlate with Antifa is way more violent. But they have the justification for violence because it's justice against these evil CEOs. Conscious Reality says, did you see the viral video of Elon Musk's son in the Oval Office, just like JFK Jr. as a child in the Oval Office? Yeah, I did see it, and I memed Musk and his son as Dr. Evil and Mini-Me. And his son is like, yeah, we stole the election, but who's going to know? And he laughs. Like he's obviously been coached or it's a troll. I'm not quite sure, but people are saying he must have overheard something. And the idea that Musk stole the election, which is really common, you hear it all over now. It's being said he helped rig the election. That's part of the madness. The billionaire CEO who funds the Nazis online, the villain who gets taken out, is in fact accused of having stolen the election. Maggart says, good prediction. Joined by Violent Pangon. Thank you for joining. Yeah, I think it's pretty simple to just make these predictions because we saw with Luigi Mangione the reemergence of the Joker narrative, and the Joker came out before the summer of 2020, and it all ties into class warfare. So you have BLM on one side and MAGA on the other. MAGA 1776, BLM 1619. And the 1619, 1776 thing is one of these bifurcations that I want to go into depth about and why I reference these years. Conscious reality says, is it real? Yeah, good question. Everything's fakeable at this point. I think there's pretty solid evidence that Elon Musk does, in fact, exist. I've often questioned the existence of Grimes. Grimes could be like Sim 1, that movie with Al Pacino, where they have is it Al Pacino? Where it's a simulation, and people don't know that this is a fake pop star. And I think that could be the case with Grimes. And I thought so because I listened to her speech about using AI to perfect communism, to get rid of systemic waste and fraud and liberate us from having to do forced labor, because that's not a vibe, as she said. And her mannerism, her cadence, it was just so musky. I was like, Grimes is either Musk in some kind of a um, AVR, like Lord of the Rings. This guy wears a suit with little sensors, and then he crawls around, and on the screen he's Gollum. So I'm like, is Grimes Musk's Gollum? And I've had this idea for some time. And after I first brought it up, Grimes supposedly disappeared. I mean, left and moved into a different house with some interesting character. Who was it? Some military whistleblower or something. Anyway, side note. Okay, let's continue. Conscious reality says history repeats itself. Oh, yeah, absolutely. History doesn't rhyme, it repeats itself. They say history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes, but no, they're just recycling. They recycle everything. So this idea of JFK Jr. and JFK and Musk, it's probably intentional. The QAnoners are probably going crazy with this stuff because the noners have always had a great deal of faith in Musk for some reason. Same thing with I mean, there's a few characters that they really venerate, but Musk is still one of them. And I'm like, this is probably why why the flat Earth movement has been so reviled, because it throws away the whole space program in general. And you can't take Musk seriously as a savior for whatever, for free speech, savior of America. You can't take it seriously if you're aware of his space fakery and what space fakery actually represents. And I called this out when he bought X. I said, well, when he bought Twitter and he turned it into X, I said, Musk is going to be viewed by the global community as the leading cause of space junk and mind junk. And we're seeing that right now. SpaceX space junk is affecting flights. Planes are having to dodge space junk now. It's landing in people's yards. So space junk is a thing. And disease X is the madness. It's the mind viruses. Patricia Steer says, hi from Disease X. Well, and Disease X is a term, it's a designation for the big one that's going to shut down the world as per WHO. And I don't think Disease X is going to be a virus, but the mind virus, the madness. And all of the predictive programming supports this. Even the movie The Madness is specifically about the influence of the billionaire who stole the election, financing Nazis online, and the memes they put online turn people into violent killers, into radical extremists. Gondola says, I want you to look into the Grimes song called Darkseid. Read about who that character is from the DC universe. Darkseid's friend looks like Trump. Okay, I will look into that. I think we came across that before, but I'll put that in my notes. Now, I miss OBS already because it's really simple for me to open different windows and bring in audio and do kind of some research on the fly, but I'll get that squared away here very soon. The premium version has some options. So I'll look up Darkseid. The DC universe is just one of many fictional universes that overlaps with the mainstream media fictional universe. And if you really want to understand the world today, you need to understand the concept of closed informational systems, because every religious holy book, whatever the religion, if it has a complete story, creation to the end times, everything in between, you can't add on to it. You can't ad lib. It's just the pure word of God or whoever. That's a closed system. It's not open to no information. Same thing goes for various orthodoxies like climate change. 97% agree, therefore. The 3% get excluded. It's a closed system. It's settled science. Well, we have settled journalism in the same way. And the world of settled journalism doesn't allow certain things into the narrative picture. So it's a closed system. You can't edit it. As I often say, the fake news becomes history over time. And it was Napoleon Bonaparte who said, history is lies agreed upon. And I think we can say that's true of media daily. And again, it goes unchallenged. It becomes part of the history. The minority of stories that are actually truly fake and contrived, PR stunts and otherwise, become the main drivers for all the real news. So all the real genuine journalists are dupes and stooges operating within a Truman Show with no clue. Imagine being a journalist 20, 30 years in, not realizing that you're reporting on fictional events, that you're an unwitting crisis actor, that you've been a LARPer this whole time. Nobody wants to know that they've been playing somebody else's character. It's a paradigm shock at best. But I'll take a look at this Dark Seed character. I'm working on some composites. Like I'm doing a IPR deep dive number 2, a composite on Elon Musk and all the different parts, the components that become this Frankenstein monster that we often refer to as Pope Elon here, for with good reason. All right, joined by Esteban, conspiracy alarmist. Bach Precision says Gollum, slave boy in Arabic. Yeah, the Golem's an interesting story. The Golem of Prague, this clay statue brought to life through some kind of Kabbalistic magic. And I think it kind of has some correlations to the idea of the Terminator 2, of robots that go out of control. AI is a type of a golem. This is like even Frankenstein's monster. You could consider to be something similar to a golem, where you have inanimate matter, and the scientist, the wizard, whoever animates it with life, and they lose control of it. And that's what we're talking about with AI also. The idea that we have some inanimate matter, dead matter, that is somehow able to be a conduit for life when life is breathed into it. And I have to get the verse, but doesn't God breathe into the mud to breathe life into it? I was reading about talismanic magic, and one of the things that I see frequently in various schools of thought on the matter is that the creator of a talisman or an idol literally breathes into it with this belief that the breath contains the life force that is that the energy never dies; it just takes new form. And if this is true, it makes me wonder, what are we feeding into our phones? If there is anything to this notion of sentience inhabiting matter in the primitive, superstitious, magical sense, then it would certainly be true with all of your modern technologies. Just something to think about. Is your phone possessed? Someone had done some work on this, and they said every single emoji is actually based on one of the 72 demons of King Solomon that he sealed into these brass vessels, you know, goetic magic. Conscious Reality says, I mean, the whole setup in the Oval Office seems staged. Who brings their kid into the office just to hear him say you're not the president? Yeah, 100%. It's all staged, but what was the purpose of that particular event? The left is saying that Musk is upstaging Trump. I wouldn't, I don't think so. I don't think that it's taken that way. But bringing his child around is kind of interesting. It does look like the whole JFK Jr. thing. Thrustazar says spakery. Oh, yes, space fakery. The whole flat Earth, round Earth debate was always there to hide the space fakery. And the people who are focused on it can't get past it. I mean, they should be talking about space fakery. That is the main thing. Bach says OBS gets problems with every update. Right. Darkseid's accomplice is called Glorious Godfrey. Looks just like Trump, says Gondola Wish. Okay, very good. Before the Super Bowl, I found a clip from Brothers Grimsby where Trump is at a stadium and he gets shot. And I'm just like, there's so many examples of predictive programming that I missed before I put together that IPR deep dive number 1. Conscious Reality says, what do you think about the asteroid that NASA says they can't stop it? Do we need to wake up Ben Affleck and Bruce Willis to stop it like Armageddon? Yeah, that's right. And they had already predicted one for 2029. They said, no, it's not going to hit us. Now it is going to hit us. And then we had that movie Don't Look Up. But see, in the movie Don't Look Up, there was no chance of stopping it because the billionaires, the I think it was like a combination of Musk and Bezos and maybe a bit of Steve Jobs, the main, um, I guess the owner of the company that was going to mine the comet, had doomed us all because instead of deflecting the comet from hitting the Earth in Don't Look Up, these rich individuals decided to mine it to make themselves trillionaires. Well, since they didn't deflect it in time, we all died. And that's just meant to be a lesson about climate change and how the rich people are going to kill us all. And we can't let the rich people kill us all. Same thing with Musk. You can't let rich individuals destroy entire systems. I hear this again and again. It's like a meme. I listen to far left podcasts all the time, and they're like, Musk is an example of why we can't have billionaires. Like billionaires are a problem. Billionaire CEOs are the new. They're being vilified at a high, at a really. Um, they're really raising it to a fever pitch. Like Musk is literally destroying low Earth orbit. Musk is destroying cyberspace and minds who get in touch with what he's influenced. And what is he doing in low Earth orbit? Well, he's overloading it with too many CubeSats for what? Just an advanced meme delivery system to spread his madness. We can't justify it. The global community can't justify America's free speech absolutism, cannot justify billionaire entrepreneur capitalists taking over the universe. When we go into the universe, humanity must do so as a collective, not as competition. And this is not a new story. There was a Netflix kind of a fake, it was sort of a documentary, mockumentary. I mean, it was a documentary movie called Mars. And it was about a trip to Mars. And there's two different groups. One group was a bunch of scientists looking for life, and it was just mostly female scientists looking for life on Mars. They're followed up by space cowboys, a group of male astronauts who are going to Mars to mine for oil. So the female astronauts, space travelers, scientists in their base, they find life on Mars. But the instant they find that life, the astronauts from Texas, which obviously represents Musk and his ilk, this is why you had Bezos wearing the cowboy hat. These space cowboys had gone out there and caused an earthquake, and everybody dies or something like that. It's a it's a documentary, but Musk is in it, and they put in real interviews, so it kind of looks like it's real, like a hypothetical describing our first mission to Mars and why it was screwed up because we let the capitalists go to Mars. So the lesson is when we go to Mars, when we go to the moon, we will not be doing so as Americans. America has to basically um, be de-existed before we can go into space. We are the problem. And the movie Don't Look Up I alluded to was retelling the story of the Titanic in a way. The lead character being Leonardo DiCaprio. Titanic hit by an iceberg, Earth hit by a comet, which is just ice. And the story here, though, is that America is going to sink us all if America doesn't fundamentally change its relationship to its trust of science, mistrust of science, and also our political economic system, which is destroying the environment. It's just nonstop. The programming is nonstop. Hasn't affected me. I mean, I don't recycle. I have never I don't recycle. Nothing can make me recycle. I will put the wrong stuff in the wrong buckets. I hope I don't get arrested for saying so, but I commit climate crimes, I suppose, because it's a farce. It's a way to expiate guilt. It's a form of confession. Do you go to confession every week? Well, if you recycle, you kind of do. You're confessing to Gaia, your climate sins. And this is a thing. NBC has a entire website dedicated to climate confessions. And it's really sad. Some people are like, I feel so bad for using so many paper towels to clean up after my cats. Will Gaia forgive me? Please don't send in the floods. It's superstition. And it's a repackaging of a more well-known myth, Noah's flood. And when you look at these stories, it's kind of notable too, and it has to do with the bifurcation I alluded to earlier. The left is very much in line with climate change, blaming private sector. Notice the pattern here. And the right sees the floods as caused by either nature, they minimize it, or if they're further to the right, they'll say it's God. God is judging us or God is using climate change. But their judgment is because their belief is the judgment is because of what the left is doing, the progressive utopians. So the left is dooming us all according to the right and vice versa. It's like that with every major issue. And they may disagree on the cause, but they agree the thing is happening. You'll see the same split when it comes to every single climate disaster. When it came to the recent fires in LA, the left said it's climate change, obviously. And then the right says, no, obviously it's the government with direct energy weapons or malfeasance and negligence. And before the news was really even big, I said, look, left is going to blame the right, private sector, capitalism. Right's going to blame government. It's so predictable. It really is. It's just a parallel system and they never cross. There's no intersection. I mean, I came across one person who claimed to be a liberal left-wing conservative or something, and it's like, okay, fine. You can claim that you're not consistent or coherent, and the exception doesn't disprove the rule at all. And the purpose to lie world is to just really lay this out bare that everybody's being played in a rigged game. They rigged the election. I mean, however you look at it, by limiting the options. You're voting for characters. I mean, it's kind of like at this point, it should be just plainly obvious. The unification, the unity, the ubiquitous media fakery that no one contradicts within the system tells you we're in a global Truman Show. It's so vast. I call it the new monotheism. It is a monolithic entity. And so it's kind of useless to talk about governments in plural. There's just one. And if it wasn't the case, then the space fakery wouldn't be something that all these different countries agree upon and all share in, because it's a scam that all the governments are a part of. Thrustazar says the only thing they recycle is aluminum, maybe. Well, the whole premise of recycling, though, is to put on the consumer a burden of guilt and a sense of responsibility for what they see on the nightly news. When they say, oh, look, you guys caused the fires in Maui. And we may say this is ridiculous, but I was listening to some Daily Beast podcaster, Molly Jongfast, and she said, my heart goes out to the people in Maui who are victims of my consumption of fossil fuels. She was literally taking some of the guilt. She was actually saying, I caused the fires in Hawaii. Conscious Reality says, what happened to the ozone? Remember they banned hairspray in the 90s and blamed and shamed people who use hairspray. Right. Whenever I hear about that, I always think about the ISS, the astronauts are up there in space, supposedly, but we know where all the hairspray went. It's always one thing or another. Global freezing, global warming, ocean levels rising. The common denominator here is universal threats. The universal threats are the real unifiers. Thrustazar says they charge the consumer too for fake recycling, point of purchase, and the trash man. In 2020, one of my main criticisms of the way it was handled was if we can have a blue trash can in front of every house for recycling, why can't we have a red biohazard container for bloodborne pathogens or infectious waste? Because there are rules in place. You can't throw your infectious waste in the regular trash. I mean, you get a bloody nose, Kleenex, fine, probably not a big deal, but generally speaking, medical waste does not get thrown in with the regular trash. They should have put red buckets everywhere. That would have been a useful thing for maintaining the control of waste, potentially infectious waste. But no, recycling is a big joke. It's just to make people look bad. I mean, feel bad, feel guilty, and then you can tithe away. You can pay. You can give the government more power to save Gaia, and then you'll be fine. All right, let's see here. Let's go ahead and go through my Notes. Yeah, so Elon Musk's Doge minions have found their new target, NASA. So NASA is being targeted for cuts. And it's not like they're going to say, oh, look, they've been faking everything this whole time. No, obviously, this is just performative. It's all performative. So we have Gulf of Trump now. Who cares? The anti government crowd is celebrating. Meanwhile, they're being blamed, framed for every psyop. When the plane, the American Airlines flight hit the Black Hawk, who do they blame? They blamed Musk for firing air traffic controllers. They blamed Trump and Musk. That was their go-to. And the right blamed DEI, predictably, as I said they would beforehand. Just like they did for the assassination attempt, they said it was because of DEI. It's it's almost comical how predictable this bifurcated war is, how each side is going to use the same excuse every single time. Truman says likely all the world leaders are friends behind the scenes. Well, look at how friendly Obama and Trump were, yucking it up and laughing. Hillary was laughing at his joke about turning the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America, and Hillary's still alive. According to the hardcore Qers, the crackheads, spelled with a Q. I don't want to offend real crackheads, but the Q anon types. Uh, for years, they've been saying that Hillary Clinton has been git mode, that Obama has been guillotined, that the New World Order has been put down by the white hats. And then they show up and they're all buddies. And they have to jump through hoops. They'll say, oh, that's because these are actors wearing masks to make it look like everything's normal because they can't tell us the truth right away because it's too shocking. So they need a lot of QAnoners to get up to speed on the information to wake their family members up. I mean, they had this entire religious program based on it, sort of like almost Jehovah's Witness. There's some evangelical aspects, but the idea was that there was this major transformation happening behind the scenes, and none of these characters we see anymore should even be around. But no, they're all obviously in the same club. All the world leaders are friends behind the scenes. Yes. And I'm pointing out this structure so that people stop falling for the anti-position. So you have Candace Owens pretending to be a truther, and she's talking about how on 9/11 this group of people were warned, so they weren't there. They were somehow spared. And people have been saying this stuff since the event happened. They have their scapegoat, but the problem with that premise is it assumes the buildings were really taken down by terrorists. It assumes all the deaths. So then it gives justification for finding a scapegoat because now we're mad because there's all these victims. So the anti-position doesn't take you out of the box, and it gets you chasing a scapegoat that they manufactured for you. So Candace Owens is obviously a misleader, and she's getting ahead of all the major psyops to give you a misdirection line, what I call a guardrail. Candace Owens talking to Bart Zabrell about the moon landing being faked, but they don't talk about the ISS. Yeah, let's talk about a dusty, dusty old psyop from 60 years ago. All the main participants are dead or senile, just not even there. And meanwhile, let's not talk about the concurrent ongoing psyop that's been going on for what, 24 years. Didn't Joseph Smith get those golden plates in secret, says Gondola Wish. From what I heard, and I was briefly married to a Mormon when I was in the military, Joseph Smith was chasing some frogs through the woods, and they stopped, and then they turned into an angel who said, dig. And he dug, and he found these gold plates. And then he took them home, and he had them transcribed. But no one was allowed to see the plates but him. He had a sheet. So as he transcribed, someone else wrote it down. And before this, he was involved in treasure hunting and other such things. Yeah, the angel Moroni led him into the forest. I consider the Mormon church to be sort of like a Masonic Catholic amalgamation. It really has a lot of Masonic elements, the endowments, the Masonic underwear. The retro baptism is kind of neat. So like you didn't get baptized, you're in hell, and so then in the temple they're able to pull you out or something. If you believe in this stuff. Now, I don't think their celestial kingdoms are very equitable. Like they have various levels of the afterlife, and I think you have to be in the right place, born in the right families to go to the top heaven. I would probably end up, I don't even know if I'd make the cut, to be honest. All right, let's see here. Let's move on. We're talking about Luigi. Oh yeah, Elon Musk is the enemy. Let me share this screen. So there's been this meme going around. Elon Musk is the enemy. Right out of, like I said, this is right out of that TV show, The Madness. Now this is a glowering, angry looking Musk, looks like Big Brother. And then you have Luigi and the Batman signal. The folk hero, Luigi Mangione, is templated off of Joker. He's kind of like Robin Hood, takes from the rich, gives to the poor, a class warrior, totally manufactured. Some people say, well, so I've heard some people ask, how do you know it's fake? What makes you say it's fake? Well, we have hallmarks. Like, first of all, how do you know it's real? If someone says, how do you know the Luigi Mangione thing was fake? You have to ask them first, how do you know it's real? Because their answer, alarmingly, is, I saw it on TV. Okay, well, if you're someone who knows how much media fakery is going on, it routinely goes on, then why would you selectively choose to believe this one? If you're smart enough to figure out that Trump faked the assassination attempt, that was a hoax, then why would you think this one would be deserving of less scrutiny and skepticism? But the hallmarks of a hoax consist of, in my view, uh, concurrent drills or or predictive programming and a bifurcated political narrative where each side has a perfectly polarized response to whatever it is. So Luigi walks out of the madness based on the Joker, numerous connections to the Riddler, and Riddler and Joker have been connected to all the shooters. So there's already these elements to it that we're picking up on. There's interesting symbolism, the 47-story building where Trump was giving his acceptance speech, like the location of it. There's more though when you go into the madness, of course, is one example, the Joker thing. But when you look at the split, how the left is suddenly, we love this guy, free Luigi, throw a bunch of money at him, and they applaud him, and they have Luigi lookalike contests. So it's like force memed. Everybody sees the story, and people are taking sides though in a really extreme thing, a position where, and I hear this all the time. It's crazy. They're not even ashamed of it. Leftist podcasters will speak glowingly of Luigi, and they're all of the opinion that he did a good thing. Like there's a consensus that they've already reached. So there's that aspect of it that is highly indicative of hoaxery. It has just agenda written all over it. He had his manifesto out there within 5 minutes of the shooting. They're like, what, deny, depose, no, deny, delay, depose, something like that. They took this book title about abuses in the insurance agency and kind of repurposed it with depose, which means assassinate. So we had the other connections. You see Luigi in a car, it looks like the Joker in the back of the cab. You see Deadpool, a Deadpool reference, which, if you don't know the Deadpool reference, Deadpool was depicted in one of the pictures where Luigi's in a cop car, and the air freshener was Deadpool. And Deadpool's name is Wade Wilson. And right now, there was a serial killer on the news called Wade Wilson who has a Joker smile and has a lot of fans, a lot of lady fans. So there's just these overlaps we've been pointing out that just suggest this character is part of, he's a composite. Now, in addition to all of that, other reasons why we might consider it to be a very hoaxy and manufactured is the predictive programming is a huge part of it. The the split narrative is another huge red flag or indicator of hoax. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in this story that would have led us to think it was real, because the person who's suggesting that it is real would have to provide some kind of tangible evidence as far as, where's the blood? Where are the bodies? I mean, there's nothing tangible to attach to it. And the burden of proof is on the person making the extraordinary claim, in this case, the media or the media advocate. So the media doesn't provide the burden of proof. Why should you believe it? You shouldn't. Now, if someone does believe it and they ask you, why don't you? You're like, well, you're a media advocate. If they can't prove it, how can you? And it's important to recognize too that we're under no obligation to believe anything without evidence. And that's how they get people into the Truman Show. They inundate them with so much information 24/7 that they don't have time to parse it all. And they end up having to rely on faith and trust. And that's by design. Trust me, have faith. Well, that's a blind spot. And I describe the media as an excellent liar, a good liar. A good liar doesn't lie with every breath. They lie strategically when they have the trust of those they intend to lie to. So, this trust relationship with media is really the weak spot. That is the thing that gets people caught up in these lies and gets them to believe misinformation. Trust. It's like you don't need to trust. You can trust but verify. I say don't even trust. Maggart says, Tim, you've ever been married? Yeah, it's well, I was in the military and I did marry a Mormon and it was a huge, huge, colossal mistake. It wasn't the Mormon side that was a mistake. I mean, I think even that's when I learned about Mormonism, but because of her past behavior, even before I met her, she had been excluded. And that's when I learned that it's sort of an elitist organization that uses shame and ostracism to keep people under control, to keep people in line. I mean, it's a fascinating cult to study, a religion to study. I don't know how people believe it. I mean, I really find the story of Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, to be kind of comical. Now, did they really tar and feather him? I don't know. I don't think he was 33. You know who was, though, besides Jesus? Martin Luther. Martin Luther, when he nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the church, he was 33. And I don't have anything against religions. I'm an alien anthropologist. I'm here studying it from an off world stage perspective and looking at it objectively. I look at these different systems and I'm recognizing the overlaps and how it all appears to be interlocking. And I think that's the main takeaway here is that these are all interlocking belief systems. They're sometimes they're mutually exclusive, but they adhere to the big picture enough to where they're not censored. For example, Scientology. You might think Scientology isn't taken seriously, it's just a cult, but no, actually, it's a template for our future concepts of religion. It's a space religion. NASA is a space religion. I call it NASAtology for a reason, because there's a point where science gets replaced or becomes augmented with stuff that you can only believe if you have faith and trust that they're not manipulating the information. And that's typical of religions where you have to trust the priesthood, the ones who've had the view, the God's eye view. Wake Soda says religions are death cults. Yeah, and we can also expand religion to say political ideologies. I mean, we're talking about belief systems. Anything can become something of a death cult in the sense that it's a death to the individual to the extent that you must sacrifice your autonomy for the benefit of the group or sacrifice the autonomy of mind to remain in agreement. And belief systems are unchallenging. It's passive. And that's why I make a distinction between the passive media consumption of the general public versus the active media consumption of the media fakery analysts. Maggot says, thanks, Tim. Just asking. I've never been. Yeah, I think marriage is fine if you have kids and stuff. I mean, whatever. I just think that it's not something to do flippantly because it takes a while for the mask to slip off of people, and the brain chemistry to wear off so you can see clearly. But that's what people do. I was obviously uh, probably dumb and emotional or something. It was a long time ago. All right, let's move on. We were talking about Luigi. Musk is the enemy. So here's something that someone sent to me the other day. I couldn't put the picture on the screen. Free Luigi in a subway. I mean, this is a meme that has been disseminated from the top down, and now it's bouncing back from the street level. This isn't a Poe. I mean, what's intriguing about this whole thing is I talk about the bifurcation, the left right split, but the left does not need Poes. They don't need to fake it. They don't need to stage people burning dumpsters and looting. Uh, and the reason this fundamental distinction between left and right, even though they're parallel systems and it's a political horseshoe, the left is intrinsically married to the state, whereas the right takes this anti-state stance. So the anti-government or limited government versus pro-big state, state-olatry, worshiping Big Brother, that explains the fanaticism you see on the left, where for them, they're signing off on the idea of a class enemy that can just be shot in the back. And the show The Madness has this accused assassin given cover in the hood. Like the people are protecting him because they see what he did as a good thing. You don't see that kind of shameless approval when it comes to violence from the right, although there was a great deal of fantasizing among the QAnoners. They were consistently fantasizing about killing or seeing the executions of their enemies. So, like, none of them have clean hands. Both the left and the right have theatrical blood on their hands. I mentioned this the other night, but it's worth repeating. Trump sends moon rock back to NASA that has been displayed in the White House since 2021. This lunar sample is going back to the NASA headquarters. And why? It says the U.S. Space Agency has long had its sights set on sending Americans back to the moon before the decade is out, but Trump is more preoccupied with planting the stars and stripes on Mars, to be exact. So the suggestion here is that Trump stripped away the moon rock from the Apollo mission because we need to focus on Mars. What's up, Will Niedrich? Happy New Year's to you too. It's been a great new year so far. 2025 has not disappointed. PSYOP rich environment. This is our think tank's was 7 years strong, and we're getting better. We really are. And that's become apparent over the next few months, in my opinion. You know, the truth just needs to be elucidated. It stands on its own, and it's been guardrailed, it's been obfuscated, and we're clearing a lot of that fog away. And once you clear it away, I mean, it's a one-way trip when it comes to off-world stage. Once you leave the world stage premise, you understand, or the closed system, you understand the whole concept here. That, like a religious worldview, prepackaged, not open to outside input, mainstream media has the same function, the same structure. It's a closed system. And closed systems are intrinsic to this whole thing and how it works. The Truman Show is such a perfect model for how this thing really works. But this particular closed system we talk about of MSM includes the alternative versions of things. And so the alternative media people think, oh, we're breaking the matrix, we're stepping out. It's like, no, you took the red pill. You went deeper into the deception. NA literalist says the White House believe in moon rocks. Well, the moon rocks, as far as NPR knows, were petrified wood. which means since astronauts can't lie because they're all honest, right? NASA doesn't lie. Therefore, the moon is either A, made of wood, or B, and I think someone brought this up the other night, 66 million years ago, when that 33-mile wide space rock hit the Earth and killed the dinos, it knocked a lot of biomatter into the space between the Earth and the moon. And so parts of the Earth, dead dinosaurs, dinosaur bones, and presumably trees, and maybe a bit of ocean, splattered on the moon, right there on the face of the moon. So it's dripping with dead dinosaurs and ocean and trees. And I would imagine 66 million years later, it would be largely petrified. So maybe that's what they picked up. There are dinosaur bones on the moon, if you believe the official narratives, if you have faith. All right, let's move on. I wish I did. No, no, not necessarily. I wish there was evidence to support their claims because it would be a lot cooler. Like, who wouldn't want to live in a solar system where you do have like a dinosaur belt? You do have evidence of dinosaurs and dinosaurs being splattered across the solar system. There was this episode of 60 Minutes I was watching where an astronaut was being interviewed, and he said that once Mars had an atmosphere like Earth, but it was hit by an asteroid and it destroyed the atmosphere. But parts of Mars were scattered into the solar system. And by the mechanism of panspermia, it fell onto Earth. So life on Earth originated from Mars. We are all Martians. That was what this astronaut was saying. And you can believe them. Buzz Aldrin said that there's a monolith on Mars. And so for the people who believe this stuff, who are they to say this isn't true? Do you know what I mean? Like, how can they be selective?
Progress is a philosophy.
You shouldn't be able to say, well, I believe in Apollo 11 and I believe everything Buzz Aldrin says, but I don't believe him when he talked about monoliths on Mars. No, I'm sorry, that's not how it works. You don't get to cherry pick the verses from your holy book. You have to take the whole package. So here's C-SPAN. Buzz Aldrin reveals existence of monolith on Martian moon.
Habitation on the moon. We can visit other people with their habitation. We can keep track. If there's something very important to be developed from the moon, I'm not sure what it is right now. And I sure think we should identify what it is for America to make such gross expenditures again for human habitation on the moon. We can help. We can join with. Together, we can explore the moon and develop the moon. We should go boldly where man has not gone before. Fly by the comets, visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that?
Who put that there? That's right out of 2001 Space Odyssey. And if you recall 2001 Space Odyssey, they find the monolith on the moon, and this is covered up by some general named Floyd with the story of an epidemic. It was an epidemic that they used to convince the public that there was something else going on other than evidence of an alien presence on the moon. Truman B says IPS needs an interview with Jim Brewer. Make it happen. Get him into auto hoax mode. You know, I'm on his Patreon. I listened to his conversation with Fight the Flat Earth. It was very interesting. He's a skeptic. He listened to Dearth, deep inside the rabbit's hole, and his whole take on the flat Earth. And then he talked to Fight the Flat Earth after the final experiment. And he's one of those individuals who clearly reserved judgment, didn't just believe what Dearth was saying, but got both sides. And I think we need to talk to more skeptics because skepticism is undervalued. I think it's illegal. I'm not sure. Have they banned it yet? Now Neil Armstrong interestingly performed communion, the Catholic Holy Communion on the moon. He talks about breaking the bread, pouring the wine in the chalice, and reading the prayers. And this was kind of criticized by some vocal atheists at the time. And so they kind of diminished the story, but I think it's highly significant. And it contradicts what Candace Owens said when she says that NASA is Satanists. You could say pagan, you could say pantheistic, panpsychism, maybe cosmism. There are various ways you could describe Nasatology, but Satanism would not be it. Sleepy Random says the first man on the moon was the cameraman. They have explanations for all this stuff. And this is typical. They give you a conspiracy narrative and they give you a bunch of bad leads that you can run with. I think the one thing you need to debunk the moon landing is ask where's the moon? Like, where is it? I mean, I've been critical of the moon landing for some time because when you look at the ground level view, you don't see a moonscape. You don't see miles and miles of moon with craters. Show me a moonscape. I mean, you can see craters from above looking down, and they could be photographing the model because they simulated the mission perfectly. They had simulations so good that people in mission control could not have known the difference. So it's fakeable. It's already in the scope of fakeability. But when you look at these various shots of the moon and video, like when they're doing the moon buggy and stuff, there is no moon. They're in a 7-Eleven parking lot, maybe a Walmart parking lot. Like, it's not that big. The horizon is right over there. Like, you could throw a rock over the horizon. Sorry, this is not a Goodyear blimp. The moon is not that small. It's a quarter the size of the Earth. If you were to look out at the horizon, being a human being, about 5, 6 feet tall in that range, you're going to see moon as far as your eyes can see. It's going to converge with the horizon. And yet, the moon photography we see is, again, it's a parking lot. It's an airplane hangar, probably in New Mexico somewhere. Thrustazar says maybe he did a satanic communion. Well, it's just a misappropriation of Satan, and it's infused a lot of Hollywood and literature and misconceptions. But when you look at the religious practices of the power elite as demonstrated in their very public rituals, they worship the sun, they worship the moon, they worship the planets. And by worship, I mean they venerate, they make observances, they recognize the cycles of time and reenact them on a human microcosmic scale. That's what the Sabbats are. That's what the celebrations of the solstices and the equinoxes are. The dramatization of the sun god's life is a personification of a sun. And this is what they actually practice. It's worshiping nature. It's like, I call it, it's not even polytheism, it's more like animism. It's a worship of the forces of nature. So Satanism wouldn't explain it at all. And besides, the Satanist religion, they don't even believe in Satan. It's kind of this atheistic LARP. Conspiracy Alarmist says Brewer interviewed Truth 777, the YouTube mask guru whose real name is Tyler Ritter, son of Jack Tripper. And Brewer tried to lead Ritter to blame Jews, but Ritter hijacked the convo and said whites. Interesting. Well, that's another split. Which side are you on? Critical race theory or critical Jew theory? CRT, CJT, left and right, each have their own scapegoat in the other. All right, let's move on. I'm going through my minds.com. And it has not been a slow news week. There's been a lot of stuff happening. It's just I've been working on other projects, but starting tomorrow, we're going to be doing the 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time regular IPS deprogram. So I know we're kind of off to a late start tonight, but I've been making it a point to get ahead on my art store. It's in the black for the first time in like a year. Gondola Wish says the episode of the television show Three's Company where Jack's testicle was visible to the camera via his shorts was particularly odd. Yeah, I didn't read that comment before I read it aloud. I didn't peruse it. I assumed there was something relevant here. I mean, maybe there is. Didn't Buzz Aldrin tell Conan O'Brien he didn't see the moon landing live? Well, this is a misconception because people will say India faked the moon landing really bad. It looked like a cartoon. No, they show you a concurrent cartoon since there isn't a live video of it landing. So it's a visualization. But the public doesn't seem to notice this. They take it literally. They have to be told it's fake. You know, you had that recent mission. What is it? Artemis. So the Artemis mission was being prepared, and this was the one that took 42 days to go around the moon. That was the whole point of the Artemis mission. And they did this animation of the rocket going around the moon and going back. But the animation was so good that they had to put a notice on it that said, "This is only an animation. We haven't done the mission yet." Because the people who believe in this stuff wouldn't know the difference between the animation and the real thing. Like this is a theme at this point. It's just like a recurring theme where they're having to constantly tell people what is real and what isn't because they can't figure it out for themselves. But if they didn't put that notice, this is an animation, people might have thought, hey, we already sent the Artemis mission up there. And if we were really cynical and ambitious and perhaps manipulative, we could start a space program here. I've toyed with the idea in the past. I said, hey, let's start Saturn X. Let's come up with spacefaring. And let's just say we're going to put a bunch of craft on the rings of Saturn for future use. And we're going to, and this again was this concept of let's have a whole space program, but instead of really sending anything into space, we're just going to fake it with CGI so well that nobody can dispute it. And as long as we fake it on par with SpaceX and Blue Origin, which Blue Origin is worse than SpaceX and NASA, as long as we're as good as they are, nobody has any right to call it fake. You're like, what are you, a flat earther? Of course we're sending CubeSats to Saturn. And you could charge a lot of money. And this is where it gets to be, it's like, well, that's fraud, isn't it? Taking $40,000 to send a CubeSat to Saturn, selling real estate on the rings of Saturn, like that's obviously a scam. How can you do that? Well, what do you mean? Why is it any different for me to sell real estate on the rings of Saturn than it is for NASA or SpaceX to take government money and money from the public to fake space? Like, no, faking space is a monopoly. There's a space faking monopoly. So I'm saying that we actually have all the moral justification we need to get into it. I just feel bad ripping people off. All these Truman shows who don't know they're guinea pigs. You're in some vast petri dish. You're being studied. You're mind controlled. Like, do I want to capitalize on that? Kind of no. Kind of no. I sort of have a conscience about it. But if we do have problems in the future maintaining the financing of the IPS, I might consider getting into the space fakery business. And the limiting factor is special effects and with text to video. And then the public's ability to distinguish kind of counteracts that. Joe Saunders says they can't die with a lie like this on their conscience, so they would have to confess somehow just in case there is an afterlife. Interesting. Have there been any examples? I mean, Werner von Braun supposedly told his assistant that they're going to subjugate humankind with fake asteroids, climate change, and aliens. So the alien invasion narrative has long been a mainstay of conspiracy thought, but Werner von Braun supposedly mentioned this on his deathbed. Bart Sabrell was in communication with somebody whose father worked for NASA and told some stuff before he died. So we do have some examples of people who don't want to go to hell or who believe there might be some consequences. But I don't think it's the norm. See, I don't think they think they're doing a bad thing. I think, for example, if you were going to hire a bunch of people to fake a mass shooting in order to influence public opinion about guns, you would hire people to do the job who believe it's a good idea. Like, hey, do you want to save the lives of children? Well, if you do this propaganda video with us, even though we're faking it, we will prevent real deaths. We will shut down the AR-15 companies. We will stop the mass murders. So I can see them framing a psyop in such a way that the participants feel like they have the moral high ground. When it comes to space fakery, I believe the astronauts think they have the moral high ground because they see space as a unifying religion, that all mankind is being united. We've got a history of fighting over versions of paradise. Who's got the right path to heaven? Who's got the priesthood with the real truth? Well, NASA does, and their scientists do. And their obelisks fly to the heaven that everyone now believes in. Whether you're a Muslim, Jew, or an atheist, or a Christian, or a Scientologist, you all believe in outer space. So it's a unifying heaven, and it does contain the idea of man becoming multiplanetary, unlimited progress. So space is the newest iteration of the archaic concept of heaven that the power elite sell access to. They monopolize access to it. And this is no different. So space is just heaven for the atheist. Aliens are angels for the atheists. Joined by Thirst for Truth. Thanks for joining. Truman B says IPS space launch, let's go. Well, we were toying with this idea, but we already had a civilian space program that we were backing. That was Mad Mike Hughes, who did in fact have a legitimate space program, and he was planning to do a hybrid launch. It was a raccoon, and this was part of a Science Channel show. You know, the narrative goes around that he died trying to prove the Earth flat. Not true. He was a daredevil with 30 years of experience. He was on the Jimmy Fallon show like in 2002 doing a long distance limousine jump. So he was a long time daredevil who wasn't able to get funding for his rocket until he put our billboard on it. After his successful launch, after his numerous documentaries, a lot of headlines, a lot of viral content, a lot of fame, he got the attention he wanted. He put out a documentary on Amazon called Rocket Man. After all of this, the Science Channel put together a show called Homemade Astronauts, and they were going to follow him on his trip to space. So it was during a Science Channel production that his final launch occurred. It had nothing to do with the flat Earth question at that point. Gondola says, I wonder whatever happened to that caller who would call IPS collect from jail. Yeah, hopefully he's listening. If he comes out, we'll invite him over if he's local, depending on what he was in jail for. Joe Saunders says Rocket Man was on the Roku TV a few days ago. He's the greatest. And that was a great documentary. I mean, very well produced. And what he did was incredible. And afterward, he brought that rocket to a flat Earth conference. The nose cone was all bashed up. They weren't going to let him in the conference. I don't know if you know the story, but there was a conference where it was going to be led by Bible flat earthers. The leader of the conference was like, no, there's no conspiracy. NASA's hiding God. And we're more concerned with creation and getting people into the Bible than conspiracy theories. So they were trying to get away from the usual talk about conspiracy theories, and they try to turn it into a religion. I call them conference earthers. Instead of going to the South Pole or the North Pole, they're doing conferences all the time. And they did not invite the most famous flat earther in the world at the time. They just didn't invite him. And I was like, let's just go. Just bring your rocket. And if they don't let you in, we'll park it in front of the conference room. And then we'll invite the media. And you can describe to the media how the entire movement is run by shills who want to nullify this group of conspiracy theorists and prevent them from doing anything. And that's exactly what happened. And when he showed up at the conference with his rocket, they realized they had no choice and they let him in. So he was able to more or less showcase the achievement of flying 1,800 feet in a homemade rocket, which was something of a world record in a manned launch. And I still question if NASA does any manned launches, or is it all faked? I mean, they launch something into the air, but at the point where it goes into space, you don't have a direct visual there. That's when they cut off to something that's been pre-produced. But what evidence do you have that these LARPers are really flying in one of these things? I would say none, which would make, ironically, the only legitimate astronaut on Earth would have been a flat earther, assuming NASA is faking even that stuff. And why hasn't Musk gone to space yet? Didn't I mean Bezos went? Bezos went on July 20th, 2021. It was an anniversary date of the Apollo. Bezos launched at 9:11 a.m. And it was in southern New Mexico. But Musk has not flown on his own rocket. Like, I wouldn't trust him. I wouldn't trust a chef that doesn't eat his own food. I wouldn't trust a tattoo artist with no tattoos. Why am I going to get on the Starship if Musk won't get into a rocket first? And I have a feeling what they might do to dampen enthusiasm for future spacefarers is send a starship full of celebrities and rich people to Mars, and then it's going to get hit by a comet, just like the Titanic. It'll happen out in space, and all these people are just dead. And after that, people aren't going to be so much in a hurry, and that will buy NASA and SpaceX a few more decades of time to put off the trip to Mars. Kid, of course, says, of course they don't. It's way too dangerous to put a person in a burning metal can. Right. Yeah, I don't think so either. I don't think there's any reason they would put them at risk like that. Truman B says IPS space launch, NASA Blue Origin style model rocket launch, then cut view to CGI space. If anyone here wants to get into space fakery, it is a monopoly. They won't want to recognize it, but I would be fine. We'd just we'd sell it as a rogue space agency. Like, we're rogue, we're launching it in this undisclosed location. And of course, we would have to play the game. But I like the idea of space faring or space steading. You know what seasteading is. Seasteading is you bring a bunch of infrastructure out to the sea. So you're not on any continent, no rules, no laws. It's sort of like an anarchist commune on the water, and you network with all these other ships. And I suggested space steading for Saturn, where we just get a bunch of our craft along the rings and just orbit, along the ice there, and we can pre-sell entire sections and slowly, fill up large swaths of the rings. I mean, it sounds fake, but you know how it is today. They would buy into it. Saturn's way cooler of a destination than Mars. Conspiracy alarm, it says the caller was probably in crisis actor jail with Tupac and the Central Park jogger rapist that Holly Hood, a Nipsey era IPR caller, roomed with. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I remember that story, the the Central Park jogger story, and how Trump put out an ad at the time, called for the death penalty, and then they get out. That is one of those psyops that's just been around for years and years, and they're constantly bringing it back up. But I believed it. I believed it was real back when I got all my information from one side. And then the other side still believes it's real. They just have a different interpretation. Salty says, sadistic, meticulous, little effed up design here where lies are required to keep people sane. This place is a carbon filter sewer realm with a couple cracked bells and whistles, lies versus imagination. Yeah, I think there's something to that. And lies in particular. I'm really obsessed with the notion of lies. I'm kind of like, this Lie World book is about it because you can't separate the the strategic use of lying and worldview formation, and it's just unbelievable when you get down to it, how these lies become entrenched, they become defended, and yeah, everybody becomes by default something of a liar. And the truthers that we often criticize are made to lie to themselves even, but they're not overtly lying, but they're lying because they've been manipulated into bad argumentation with logical fallacies. So there's various versions of lies. There's overt, covert, unwitting lies, deliberate lies, lies by obfuscation, and then you do have these bits of rhetoric as well, sophistry. And the worst ones, though, the most potent lies are the visual lies. And this is the deep fakery. Like, I got lied to. I believe in clownfish the size of whales because I was on TikTok and I see this clownfish the size of a whale. It was so real. But the visual lies are impossible to just flat out reject as easily as you can take a spoken lie and deconstruct the argument itself, because the visual lies are basically just only have to fool your your vision. They don't have to fool your mind in the same way. It's like illusion. You know, Les Luthor uses the phrase illusion warfare, and I think that's one of the best descriptions of this that we've seen. Salty says, if I have to lie, then I choose my own imagination, not allowed here. Yeah, the imagination is also something I think is an interesting subject for discussion, because I think what the predictive programming does is it aims at the imagination so that you mentally you empathize with characters and situations. You live it mentally as a drill, as a simulation in your head first. And then the thing happens in real life, and your associations are going to be from your own imagination. So, for example, when 9/11 happened, many people compared it to the Roland Emmerich film Independence Day. And that's because and Armageddon and other movies, Deep Impact, there were so many movies where you saw iconic buildings falling and stuff falling from the sky, national disasters. I mean, these national emergencies and these big disaster movies. And these disaster movies saturate our imaginations, and then they perform the same type of thing on the world stage. And because it's so recent in your memory, it's actually, I think, there to bolster it. It's similar to there was this a psychologist who was talking about how she had a movie poster in her office, and it was Disneyland, but she included some Warner Brothers characters. So you had Elmer Fudd, Bugs Bunny, and Daffy Duck, Warner Brothers characters in Disneyland on this poster. Well, that would never happen. Those characters don't belong there. But when she talked to her patients about their trips to Disneyland, she could ask them, did you take a picture with Bugs Bunny? Did you meet Bugs Bunny? And they would agree, and she would be able to get them to even elaborate on their supposed memories of seeing Bugs Bunny adjacent to Mickey Mouse. Well, that never happened. And she said that subconsciously, they're picking up everything in the room, and now they have this association of Bugs Bunny with Mickey Mouse. It's so recent that it's easy to get them to recall it. This is called retroactive interference. It's called misinformation effect. And the Mandela effect is actually the misinformation effect. And I determined why they don't debunk it. The Mandela effect is a very popular conspiracy theory, and it's been promoted, it's mainstream. And the reason they do not debunk it is they want you to be Mandela affectable. They want to be able to mess with your memories and your recollection. They want to influence your perceptions by screwing with your mind, gaslighting you, etc. And my contention here is that to keep you susceptible to the misinformation effect, they can't educate you on how to see through it. So you're meant to be dupable. And the Mandela affected people have been duped by the misinformation effect. And the tricky thing there is their egos do not allow them to walk back from a wrong explanation, a wrong answer that they attach to. And so they end up in their own little world. So even though they're not in a separate universe and reality's not shifting, they ironically do enter into their own universe, their own solipsistic closed system. Okay, let's move on. Just scrolling. There's gonna be a lot more to talk about tomorrow. I'm kind of slow on my notes tonight. The Super Bowl was underwhelming to me. I've been listening to various takes on the halftime show, but there is something there to it. Squid Games, that's where you get the plus sign, the square, the triangle, the circle, game over. But I think there's got to be some bigger meaning to it than this Drake versus Lamar Kendrick beef, which is totally contrived. And I'm still trying to figure out what's up with Ye. Is he getting divorced from his gimp? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but a wife is one thing, and a mute, nude person on a leash is something different than a wife by definition. Now, I mean, I'm assuming there's some consent there, but I'm just saying that's not how I think of this person. And I think they're getting divorced or something, but Ye was saying free Diddy. And I'm like, okay, wait, what's the deal here? Diddy, Drake, Epstein, is any of this real? Is anything being exposed? All this hopium. There were truthers who were saying that Musk and X and Kendrick Lamar were going to expose the deep state during the Super Bowl. People look at the Super Bowl like it's some kind of like this is going to be the revelation. This is some apocalypse. It's like no, it's just a dumb ball game that they attach to their pagan ceremonies every year. Always a nothing burger. Conspiracy alarmist said the white racist killer Tupac was in prison with named Joey Fama. That fictional race killing was devastating for New York City race relations. Yeah, the race war psyops are intriguing, and these are categories. You know, you got school shootings, you got Allah Akbar terror attacks, then you have mall shootings, and then you have the race war stuff. You know, the cops martyring somebody, and then you have I guess truck attacks has been something of a category, but that's kind of a subset of radical Islam using vehicles and planes. But the race war psyops are very powerful, obviously. And in those ones, we find the hallmarks of hoaxery in the very same way in all of them. But, you know, we say it's all fake or it's all movies. We live in a Truman Show. That doesn't mean that the media is somehow exonerated from culpability for being just plain evil, for inculcating racism, fostering division. I mean, this is modern warfare. It's just that it's mind war, but it's still pretty terrible. I mean, the PSYOP entertainment complex is what we're facing. And truthers are conditioned to only think about the military industrial complex because they're trapped in the illusion. I'm not saying what I'm saying here is that the PSYOP entertainment complex, the idea here is that the art of war, you know, Sun Tzu, the supreme art of war is subduing the enemy without any fighting. And what I'm saying is we've been subdued in this manner. And they need the polarization. They need the tug of war. They need the chasm splitting the two sides. And I'm really looking forward to getting this book completed, the lie world, because I think the key is bifurcation. And I'm working on a cover for it that has a forked tongue because we're talking about lies and the father of lie. I mean, I'm not religious, but I like these symbols and stories. So you have God, let there be light. There's the chaos, the darkness, and he speaks creation. So, in other words, his words, the words of God, would necessarily correlate to what is being created. It's truth. These are descriptions spoken into existence. And then the devil, who is the enemy of God, is the father of lies. And so, what are lies? Misdescriptions of creation. So, I look at the split tongue, the forked tongue, as an apt symbol for the mass media, how it is completely divorcing us from creation by misdescribing it and by contorting the way that we process information in such a way that we adhere to the lies and treat the lies as truth. And so it's this perfect inversion of reality. And I think that the off-world stage perspective can be elucidated by describing the system, the closed system of lies. But yeah, I say bifurcated psyop because I think of the forked tongue of the snake. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm going to have to end this for tonight. We have quite a lot to go over tomorrow, but we're going to be live earlier and we'll be taking calls. And I'm pretty sure that the earlier live streams will get us a lot more, back-to-back calls, which is always entertaining. We have the most interesting calls on the internet, in my opinion. This is Chief Crow Auto Hoax. Thanks for joining. I'll send archives.
I'm on Auto Hoax and it feels so good. You just auto believe everything like I knew that you would. In my dreams